just want me to talk?
Sure.
I'm Torey's grandmother. I was born in 1921. So when the Depression started, I was 8 years old, and it was really rough. Nobody had coal, didn't have stoves. They had to go get coal along the railroad tracks to heat the house.
I've got questions here if you want to.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, how did the Depression affect your life?
Well, I was very poor. My dad he worked on the railroad for quite a while, and we traveled from Indiana to Ohio, and we lived just anywhere we could live, and he finally got laid off the railroad, and we moved back to Columbus, Indiana, and it was very hard to get the right kind of food and the proper heating and everything. No lights unless you were real rich and could pay for them.
Alright, what was your family life like at the time?
Well, I had one sister and 2 brothers. There was 4 of us, and the food was very scarce, and the government would give us food, and sometimes it would be flour and stuff like that, and canned goods like peaches and red beans and things like that.
What did you do for entertainment then?
That's a good question. Played in the yard, I guess. We had no radio because we had no electricity because we were too poor to have electric.
Did your family have to move from one place to another during the Depression?
Yes, as I told you before, we moved from Indiana to Ohio and back to Indiana.
What were some of the typical foods that your family ate during the Depression years?
Practically nothing like meat. We had potatoes and beans and gravy and things like that, and it's not very many vegetables until spring.
What sort of clothing did you wear, and where did you get it?
I was very poor. We didn't have very good clothing. In fact, when I was in high school, that was later on, some girl gave me some clothing.
Where did you live, and what was your home like?
I lived after it got real bad, we lived in Columbus, Indiana, when it was real bad.
What was your home like?
Well, there were homes that we did have that were nice, but we didn't live there very long. And then there was one place where we had to pump water and to even drink and wash clothes and things like that. And it was very, very poor.
Did you ever know of hobos or tramps that came around where you lived?
Yes, there was. One time I was home by myself and a tramp came knocking on the door, but I didn't answer it because I was a little afraid. I was too young.
Did you listen to the radio during these years? And why or why not?
Not until I was about 16 years old, I think. When I was in high school, we had a radio.
What kind of toys did children play with back then?
My dad bought my sister and me a desk. He must have had some money then. That may have been before they had a little roll-top desk. And he took and bought me a doll one time, but I think he had more money then. Because during the Depression, we would go to a church. It was up on an upper floor, and they would give out candy. And the main thing that I've always liked is those chocolate drops. and oranges and hard candy they had. But I love those chocolate drops to this day.
Did you grow any of your own food? And if so, what kind?
Yes, the government gave my dad some land, and we grew green beans and things like that during the summer. My sister and I my dad would guide it, and my sister and I would pull the plow so he could plow the ground up. My sister was a little older.
Did your family preserve food in any way? How?
Not that I know of.
What kind of furniture did you have, and where did you get it?
I don't remember too much about it. It wasn't a whole lot. We had a heating stove where we took a bath behind, and chairs and things, but I don't remember what they looked like. They weren't the best, though.
Do you know of any movie stars or musicians who were famous at the time?
Not until I was 17 years old. My stepmother, my mother died when she was young. She was only 28. And my stepmother would not allow us to go to movies. But when I got 17 years old, I started going because I left home and stayed with his family till I got married.
How did life change for you after the Great Depression?
Well, I lived with this family for 9 years after that, and they were a little bit better, well-to-do. They had plumbing and everything that we didn't have when I lived at home. And I worked for them and took care of their children, and also did their house cleaning. And then I got a job I moved up here to Indianapolis with them later on, and he worked for what happened that during the war, World War II, gasoline was rationed, and they had to move up here because of gasoline being rationed. And I was living in Indianapolis till I got married.
Are there any lessons or fears that you learned during the Depression that keep with you today?
I'm trying to think. As a child, you don't really notice, like heat nowadays. You can't stand air conditioning, but we would have 100 degrees or more. It was really hot one year. But as a child, you don't notice it as much as you do when you're older. But we didn't have air conditioning. We didn't have heat. We would have to heat it with a coal stove and take baths behind it in a tub, pump all your water. So that was really hard.
Do you still think the Depression affects you today?
No. In fact, it made me appreciate what I have now. I have it very good now, I think, compared to what I had as a child. Because of my husband and I have worked very hard to get what we got.
Do you remember any Hooverisms, such as Hoovervilles were shacks that people lived in?
Yes, he was the president when the Depression was on. And that brings back memories that he was president during that. He got a lot of criticism because of it.
Did you know anyone that was living out in the streets?
No, I didn't.
Could you or did you spare any tramps or hobos money?
No, because I didn't have any money.
How much did things like movies cost? And
I don't know, because I said I couldn't go to movies at that time.
Did you have any furniture taken away because you couldn't pay the installment plan?
Not that I know of. My husband said his mother did. I don't remember anything like that.
Did you have many luxuries that you had to let go of, such as a car?
No.
Did you have any nice clothes, like shoes that didn't have holes in them?
I can remember my dad buying me one pair of shoes during that time. I don't know whether he had more money then or not, but I can remember what they looked like.
Did any of your family have to go work for the new plan that President Roosevelt made?
I'm trying to think. My sister got a job at a shirt factory, but I was too young. I was in school. We tried to get on at a tomato packing plant, but they didn't hire us. Then later on things got better.
At any time during the Depression, were you out in the streets?
No. We always had shelter.
Did you have a nice meal every day, or were you to the point of starving?
I don't think we starved to death. Or was very, there was times where you didn't have the right kind of food to eat, like greens and things like that. You would have mostly starches, and that's not good. You didn't have meat. So hardly ever did we have meat during the Depression.
Would you say your family was had the better half of the United States, as in money? Like, were you better off or worse off?
We were worse off than the better half.
Did your family take a big part in the stock market?
No. Didn't have any money to buy in the stock.
Okay, that's all. Okay. How old were you when you first knew about the Depression?
Learned about the Depression? Well, I was born before the Depression. I was born in 1924, and the Depression started in 1929. So that would be 5 years before.
How did the Depression affect your life?
Well, I was so young then, it was immaterial in behalf as far as using the word depression. But it was poverty. The whole nation was having a hard time making ends meet and getting their proper food and hygiene and so on. In fact, it was probably 3 years after the Depression that anyone was even able to afford a toothbrush and toothpaste. So we washed in salt and stuff like that, salt water.
What was your family life like at that time?
Well, me, myself, again, I was running around outside playing with my neighborhood friends. But as far as the family, my mother washed floors at the Hotel Severn downtown, and her paycheck was $11 every 2 weeks. And it was kind of hard to raise a family. Let's see, we had 3 brothers. There was 6 of us. She raised, including herself, 7 on $11 every 2 weeks. It was hard.
What did you do for entertainment then?
Entertainment, we did not have any. Me, myself, I climbed trees, played hide and go seek at night, and so forth. But I don't recall ever going to a movie because we could not afford it. They were 10 cents admission. But there was no entertainment during the Depression.
Did your family have to move from one place to another during the Depression?
No. Well, I was born on West 10th Street. Then my mother, I was born in that house on West 10th Street. And at the age of 4, we moved to 409 Limestone Street because my mother had to sell the home in order to have enough financial economics to afford to raise us. And then finally that rent ran out where we lived until I was 7 years old, then we moved back to Hallville.
What were some of the typical foods that your family ate during the Depression years?
Well, my mother loved green beans and mashed potatoes, and we had a lot of gravy with bread for breakfast, and it was more conservative type eating that we had back then. And meat, maybe once a week we had a pork chop or so.
What sorts of clothing did you wear and where did you get it?
Kind of clothes.
Yeah.
This may sound exaggerated, but I had one pair of pants that lasted me all year. That was 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But after that, well, then later on I had a newspaper out when I became 11 years old. Then I was able to afford buying myself good clothes and shoes and so forth.
Where did you live and what was your home like?
When back then in Depression,
Yeah.
that was 409 Limestone Street, and we was there for 4.5 years. Then we moved to Hallville, and at that time we moved to a home there on Ketchum Street, and resided there for several years. And then we would change neighborhoods occasionally to a better living quarters.
Did you know of hobos or tramps who came around where you lived, and what did they do?
Yes, that was frequent. And as poor as we were, my mother always invited them and always gave them something that got them along. She gave them a fairly decent plate of eating, but there was quite a few of them.
Did you listen to the radio during these years? Why or why not?
Yes, we acquired a radio. That goes back, let's see, my first radio we ever had, I was 7 years old, and that was a RCA, and we had that for many years. And then later on in life, well, we got a Zenith radio, a console. But that was in 1939. I think we had to wait that long to afford a good radio.
What toys did children play with back then?
Anything that was carved out of wood. I myself personally don't know of anyone that was able to purchase a toy because a financial issue forbidden it on many families.
Did you grow any of your own food?
Did I grow any of? Yes, I had a garden in the back, and I grew tomatoes. I had green beans. Let's see, I had beets and potatoes, and that's about it.
Did your family preserve any food in any way?
Any excessive food that we had, my mother canned it, and that put us through the winter pretty good.
What kind of furniture did you have and where did you get it?
Furniture my mother had at the time of my dad passing away, and we had it when they purchased that way before I was born, and we had that until 1945. Then my oldest sister sent it to her daughter in California at that time, Joanne.
Did you know of any movie stars or musicians who were famous at the time?
Well, there were several guys in the school where I went that played instruments, but as far as them attaining fame, I don't believe they did, but they were good musicians. They played polka. One guy played polka music, the other one played a violin, and another guy, don't remember his name, but he lived on 10th and Arnold. I believe he was very good with the trumpet and a xylophone, and he joined the band, I believe. And I heard he played with Tommy Dorsey for a while, so he evidently was good with him.
How did life change for you after the Great Depression?
Well, after the Depression, Franklin Roosevelt was our president, and he formed what was known as three C's, I'm sorry. And then he had the PWA, and that employed people. Were paid $15 a week, and that started people living a little bit more prosperous at that time. It wasn't much money, but it was something that we didn't have prior to that. Got the nation going again.
Are there any lessons or fears that you learned during the Depression that will keep with you today?
Well, I guess, fortunately, I don't recall anything as far as drastic fears. There's always bad accidents, etc., but vehicles on the road back then were very nil. I don't recall anything severe until later on in years when there was more vehicles on the road and so forth. Now we have many robberies and murders and so forth.
Do you still think the Depression affects you today?
I doubt that. It educated me, in fact, to know what's really bad. And when you have anything, I consider that as a gift in itself. We have a beautiful home, and we eat properly, have good clothes.
Do you remember any Hooverisms, such as Hoovervilles or shacks?
That was, remember what was the question?
Do you remember any Hooverisms, such as Hoovervilles were shacks where people lived?
No, I don't. I never got acquainted with any of that nationality.
Do you know anyone that was living out in the streets?
That I still remember of?
Yeah.
Yes, a friend that his name was George Totchett. In fact, he appeared. Another friend of his brought him here, and we were unable to identify each other, that we were past friends. We lived together on the same street for 11 years. And that was a very great thrill to have, to meet someone going back to them years. That was 1932 to 1940. And then another friend, Angelo Polis, he was a pilot, and he got killed. He trained people how to fly, and they had an accident with it, hit the ground. And I'm sure there's many occurrences of meeting friends in the past, but these were the two most significant that I can remember.
Could you or did you spare them any money or give them shelter or food?
I have given, in means of my employment when I worked at Ellison, I always gave to the Red Cross. I gave to Holy Trinity School at the time, where they remodeled 2 rooms there, and I donated $500 back then, and that was a pretty good sum. For the money was very equal to doing way more than it is today, and the dollar value was greater. That's about it. And the other churches like St. Christopher and so forth that I donate to.
How much did things like movies cost, and did you go to a lot of movies?
Well, my sister Helen and I, we would go to a show occasionally, the State Theater on Holmes and 10th Street. That was 10 cents each time. Then occasionally I went downtown to the Lyric Theater. They would have stage shows. That was 35 cents. But I have regular movies later on when I was able to afford it. Only average it maybe once every 2 weeks or so.
Did you have any furniture taken away because you couldn't pay the installment plan fee?
No, all the furniture we had at the time, after my dad passed away, was all paid for, fortunately, so there was no confiscations.
Did you have many luxuries that you had to let go of, such as a car?
No. As I purchased an automobile for myself, well, I ran it until it couldn't run anymore. But nothing was ever repossessed from me.
Did you have any nice clothes, like shoes that didn't have holes in them?
Oh yes. In fact, I volunteered for service for 1943, but prior to that I had three beautiful, I call them very beautiful suits. One was the worst at Gabardine, and I always believed in wearing good shoes, but ever since then I've been fortunate to have good clothes.
At any time during the Depression, were you out in the streets?
By not having a place to stay?
Yeah.
No, well, fortunately we always had some place to reside in at all times.
Did any of your family have to go work for any of the plants that Roosevelt made?
Yes, my brother-in-law worked at Keenan's. Naturally, that was a meat packing factory. And my sister Mary, my oldest sister, she's deceased now. She worked at the Claypool Hotel. She prepared all the vegetables and so forth in preparation that's required. And had another brother-in-law that worked also at Keenan's meatpacking place. That's about it.
Did you have a nice meal every day, or were you up to the point of starving?
I never came to the point of starving because we always had enough vegetables that even in the garden that I had. And a little bit hungry, such as anyone gets once in a while. Not by negligence, but it just wasn't there. But we made it.
Would you say your family was in the better half of the United States as in money-wise?
Oh no, it wasn't a better home. It was just a home that was able to be afforded, and the roof did not leak, and we had water. But otherwise than that, in fact, we did not have electricity for 5 years. We had kerosene lights. And electricity back then was only 3 cents a kilowatt, versus now it's considerably higher. But back then, well, you can live pretty good for $1 a day. Today you could not.
Did your family take a big part in the stock market?
No. In stock market, yet that means back then, many years ago, never did.
Okay, that's all.
Mm-hmm.